Hey, this is James Adair, Keller Williams, Tampa Central. I've got a couple of guests on today that are vital to what many of you are going to be going through. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. This is where you get your information. This is the place. So go ahead, JC.
JC Hutchinson, Chief Building Official for the City of Tampa.
And Dave?
How you doing? Dave Jennings. I'm the floodplain administrator and the assistant building official for the City of Tampa.
Perfect. And our meeting today is primarily about what this floodplain manager thing even is, and then mostly around the conversation of a FEMA 50% rule. Right. And there's so much about that. So, Dave, could you just give like a broad explanation of what your role is and how it's given by FEMA and basically what you do and how it finds its way into the code, building code?
As the floodplain administrator for the City of Tampa, our roles, responsibilities is to review construction drawings, renovations, repairs, to determine what the cost of those repairs are versus your actual value of your structure, to determine whether it's a substantial improvement or substantial damage in the event of a storm. So our role with that is we are a participant in the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program. And being that way, we are also with the Community Rating Service, which gives us the ability to earn points with what we do and how we do it. And then that gets reductions on flood insurance for all of our citizens that have to buy flood insurance. Currently, we're Category 4, which we're climbing that ladder. Category 3, we're climbing to a 4. And that gives a 25% reduction of flood premiums in the City of Tampa at this point in time. But our role is to stay consistent, to regulate floodplain properties that are in a flood zone, what they can do, elevations, make sure the floors on new constructions elevated above the base flood or the design flood elevation. So our role is kind of that. If I go more, then I'm going to start boring people.
So what's exciting about what you just said that most people don't understand is that the hassle of dealing with the city to meet these standards is what allows us to have cheaper insurance. It just doesn't feel cheap because it's expensive. It could just be more expensive if we didn't have these things in place. And until you get into this, you don't really necessarily know that. So you had mentioned a couple of things. Could you just briefly explain what the base flood level is?
Okay. In the City of Tampa in 2021, the city got new maps from FEMA. It took them about 2 years to develop those from the last set we had, which was 2008. So now the new maps in 2001 has set by modeling the elevation or the finished floor requirements for our area based upon the models that FEMA had done to determine where we should be at to keep a 100-year flood event from flooding out properties that are built.
For us.
I'm sorry?
What's the height at this point? So if you're going to build a house, it needs to be at what?
It depends on where you live. The maps are different. The elevations are different. I always suggest to people if they're looking for what their elevation they have to get to or what their flood zone is to go on to the City of Tampa Construction Services Center website. And on the website, we have a little location for flood information. When you click that, it goes to some software that we've purchased that gives you the entire city grid map. You type in your address and it pops up your address. It gives you what your base flood is, what your design flood is. If there's substantial improvement dollar values from the tax assessors, it'll load that up for you so you can see that. So that web page has done a wonder for people to do self-service. Instead of contacting us and wait for a phone call back, they can do it just by going on to our web page.
That's fantastic. That's so good. So walk me to it again. It's on the construction services page. And then what would you look for?
We got a little shortcut is tampa.gov/flood info.
Boom, drop the mic. That's awesome. So, okay, what I just learned is that you're saying that it's not necessarily that all properties have to be at 12 or 15 feet necessarily if you're in a flood zone. It's different for different areas. So that's new to me. Is there a way
to share the screen?
Yeah, knock yourself out. I should be open.
All right, let's do this. And what I can do.
Yep, perfect.
All right, so kind of Dave can walk me through as I'm navigating, but as you said, the flood maps vary based off of where you are. So, you know, and depending on what parcel you click on, you can get that information. Just kind of what Dave was telling you, what the height is, your base flood elevation and your design flood elevation. So this is available to the public anytime. Look at the information and know what they need to build to be compliant.
Nice. And what's the difference between base flood and design?
Base flood is what the map requires from FEMA on our flood insurance maps. The design flood elevation is what is required by the Florida Building Code to be added on as additional coverage above that. And the Florida Building Code requires a foot above base flood.
So important what you just said there. Okay, beautiful. I didn't know it was called design, so that's great. So design essentially is a foot over whatever that area is. So basically on that property, it's 12 foot. So good rule of thumb, 12, 10, 15, but go and look at that. That's great. Thank you so much, JC, for sharing that. Do a brief description of what this, and let's chatter of the town at this point. What is the 50% rule first? And then we'll get into how to determine valuation, how you get that first, and then renovation or substantial damage and whatnot.
Okay. The requirement for what is your requirement for 50% rule is that the repairs or construction that you're doing cannot exceed 50% of the value, depreciated value of your structure itself. Not taken in for pools, driveways, property is just the structure itself, and you're taking 50% of that value for your construction costs. That's the 50% rule in short.
Perfect. All right. Now, when all the moms get on the website and they start pushing the buttons, they many times feel like it's my whole property's worth $1 million, so 500. Well, you're talking about the improvements, right? So on our Hillsborough County property appraiser, and by the way, let me just note, this is important. It differs in different municipalities. Not all of them function the exact same way. So we'll get into the calculations, but where can they find this valuation of depreciated value?
You have two avenues to set your value of your structure. One, you can use a property appraisers. When you go onto the property appraisers, doing your search for your property, you scroll down in ours, down about halfway down, and there'll be a tab that outlines all of your structures that are there. And over on the right-hand side, it will give you a depreciated value and a total of all your structures that are on your property. And the bottom line will be your depreciated value of your structures. And that's what you would use if you're using the tax assessors to determine your 50%. Your other option is to have a private appraisal done in an as-is cash value of just the structure. And the appraiser will then do the same evaluation as the tax assessors, but it's generally a little bit higher than the tax assessors. And they will give you a depreciated value of just the structure, and you could use that value or the tax assessors, either one that's beneficial to you.
Yeah, and that's the structure before it was damaged.
Correct.
Okay, beautiful.
And also with that, Dave, that information is also available on the Forerunner parcel, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, if you scroll all the way down, so you don't necessarily have to jump between the two if you don't want
to. Oh, that's fantastic.
You go to the flood info. I'll share my screen again. The same property we were already looking at. That's what Dave was mentioning. You can just scroll down below. You see the base flood and design flood. You can scroll down right here, and that parcel ID information is imported directly from Hillsborough County Property Appraiser. So all this information is in one place. It's telling you what your depreciated value is right there. So you have all that information right there.
So in this house's case, they're looking at 3.8, for example, and $1 million of its land, essentially. Okay. And then you would take, now, Dave, if you could just get into the math of it, because it's not just straight 50%. Our county municipality offers a bump up before you do that. So if you just explain that.
Sure. Here comes the mud. You have The depreciated values you see on the screen now, you take 60% of that on a tax assessor's value. So you just take that number times 0.6, and that gives you your top end of what you can actually do in construction value. On an appraisal, which is going to be more money, you take 50% of that bottom line. So multiply that by 0.5, and that's your top end of the amount of work you can do in any 1 year period.
Huh. Okay, this is great, and I'm so glad you're in this position. So does the city of Tampa have a different rule than Hillsborough County?
Yeah, Hillsborough County's is a little different. Every municipality has a little difference in what they do. And the reason that is some municipalities want to gain more points in their ratings, which then builds them to more reduction. Everyone in the state of Florida has the same model ordinance that we have. It kind of looks the same and feels the same, but there may be more strict items inside of each individual code that the county, St. Pete, Pinellas County, all of the ordinances are slightly a little different, but they all look and feel the same. So you can kind of navigate around them a little easier because they look alike.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. I've been looking at Hillsborough County, assuming that it came over to the city of Tampa, and then we've looked at some in Pinellas versus like Indian Rocks Beach, and they are indeed different. So it's important to know which municipality you're in. But then secondarily, if they don't have the fancy software that you guys have just shown, is it best just for them to call in? If they're in the county, for example, just call their construction services department?
Well, call there. I think the gentleman who is the floodplain administrator for Hillsborough County is within their stormwater division.
Stormwater. Okay. All right. We'll have to keep that in mind because they do radically vary lengths of permit time. Is ours a rolling year or calendar year?
Ours is the 1 year look back to add on permits is anything that's an active permit or work that was done within the year at the end of the permit cycle. So if it was CO'd today or certificate of completion was handed today, the 1 year window starts today. So if you've got old permits that are out there, you have to wait until those permits have been 1 year before they get added back on to your current job that you're looking to do.
Huh. So that gets pretty nuanced pretty quick, especially if you have some old ones that are just dangling out there. All right. So when Fort Myers had their deal, they started separating off like roofs, for example, so that value wasn't tacked onto this. What are the kinds of repairs? I forgot which question it is, but what kind of repairs do you guys not calculate in to that restoration value?
Well, we don't calculate for substantial improvement on what we consider trade permits, AC changeouts, water heater changeouts, ductwork in the ceiling for mechanical equipment. Those types of things, roof permits, those things aren't calculated in for the cost of a substantial improvement. Since they are trade permits, you pull online, they're issued to you, and you go forward. But it's the renovations, the upgrades inside the house. You want to change out the cabinets and you want to redo the whole bathroom or remodel the whole house. Those are considered building permits for us. And those are the ones that we use for substantial improvement, substantial damage.
Okay, that's awesome because there's so much expense in all those. So technically for us, roofs aren't counted. I mean, not that we have a roof event, but you got a $20,000 roof that eats into your value real quick.
That's correct.
Huh, okay. What's to say that I can't get, contractor Bob, builder Bob, and he writes me a super low ball estimate. I know this is happening to you guys, sometimes good, sometimes bad. It is what it is, our owner contribution. What is there an alternative accounting, or in what ways are you trying to work with the residents, but at the same time also trying to keep bad actors from lowballing, what they turn into you guys?
I learned years ago that these arguments come up every day for substantial improvement. So when we wrote our ordinance and had to rewrite our ordinance in 2021, we used strictly the building valuation tables by ICC, and the cost of construction that we use is $64.85 times the square footage of your work area. And that's your cost of construction we use. There's no discounts. The contractor said I can do it cheaper. That's the value we use to determine your cost.
So should they even bother? I'm just in our municipality then? Is this the same for Hillsborough?
Now, Hillsborough County, I think they take some estimates or some evaluations. Pinellas County does too, but there's differences in all of those on how they actually calculate it or what they will take.
Okay, so basically just don't necessarily screw around with getting a bunch of estimates that are going to be a certain number, because you guys are going to go back to your $64 a foot.
If you're using it for substantial improvement or substantial damage, that doesn't do you any good. Just use the 64.85. But if you're looking for contract price, you need to go get a couple of bids.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, for you guys getting your permits.
Yep, $64.85 per square foot.
Okay, and this won't help anybody else at home, but one day I got stuck in that rabbit hole, that spreadsheet where it had the different building uses, and I was like, I don't know what it is. It looks like a single family. It's not a building or a school, but you're saying go with $64 and be good with it.
Yep, and that substantial improvement form is online on construction services under documents and forms, and you can just put in substantial improvement, and it'll find the form for you, and it's a 3-pager. It kind of explains it a little bit. And then the back page is the actual form that you calculate stuff on.
JC, if you've got that on the speed dial,
I'm already on it.
that would be, because listen, folks, when I went through this, I wasn't gray before, but I'm gray now. Just trying to understand it is really tough if you don't have a guide. And everything they're telling you right now is just streamlining this agonizing process. So, all right, construction services, documents and forms.
Documents and forms, and what he just talked about right there, FEMA substantial improvement form, the complete package. It's right there. So it kind of walks you through what he just talked about, understanding where our flood ordinance is. The table that's in effect is what he just said, that's 64. See if I can zoom there. 6485. That's that number he just read off to you.
VB. Okay, because all those others, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's building code numbers. I learned that later.
That's right. Yeah, and there it is right there. So 6485. And so you're able to print all this out, and this is the actual form that you fill out.
Wow. So easy. Okay. Wow. If somebody were just putting drywall back and, let's say Home Depot grade base level cabinets, I mean, they probably, and floors, I mean, they might be okay in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Well, it depends on your square. You still have to do the substantial improvement. So like in this, when you have damage or you're just doing remodeling, it's the area you're working in. So if you're doing your kitchen and your living room, then those are the square footages you add and show on your drawings. And that's what we will calculate off of. We will generally ask people on those site plan or those house plans to X off the areas they're not touching. And then when the inspector goes out to do inspections, he knows you're not supposed to be working in that area, and he's looking at those specific areas that are on your plans. If you reach into those other rooms and start doing work and the inspector notices those, they're going to make you come back in and reevaluate your substantial improvement.
Okay. That, I don't think if you're following at home, you'll understand how important what he just said is. And I don't know if you view it as a gift, but to me, that's a gift. For example, if only you're working in your 2 kids' bedrooms and it's not the rest of your square footage, that's what got flooded. That allows you to minimize what this expense is. And then you don't necessarily have to bring the entire structure up, right? So let's say, for example, you're working in one part of a commercial building. You don't have to raise the whole property if that particular part of the commercial building is too expensive, basically, right? So then you would just lift just that section to bring it up. Is that right?
Correct. Let me not throw you to too many craziness, but commercial and residential is different because the fact that residential cannot be flood proofed, you have to comply either with the elevation, lift it, or tear your structure down if you're over. On commercial, you can flood proof it by using panels, floodproofing bags, things to keep the water out of the structure. And that gives you the ability to go over the substantial because you're going to flood proof it.
Okay. So deflate time. So basically if they are, let's say my 2 kids' rooms are the worst and they needed more than what was, 50%, then the whole structure at that point does have to go on stilts.
That's correct. That's get elevated to the DFE.
Okay. But you're allowing me to only include the spaces that need that reno, not necessarily everything else. So that is a benefit.
Correct. You can do it in phases. You can do your living room, kitchen this year, wait a year, and then come back and do the other half because you take another bite at the apple every time. So you can always phase what you want to do in your house to kind of keep it under the substantial improvement requirements.
Yeah. What I think people don't know right now, and this is a little bit out of the city's purview, but people are going to probably mess around with their insurance company for at least 3 months anyway. And so this year turnaround is probably going to happen faster. So if they break it into 2 spots, it might actually be reasonable. I just think folks aren't mentally prepared to think that through yet. But if you did half and half, it's literally could be a 2-year situation before you know it, you know? So yeah, all right. We had a few more here. What else should people be asking themselves right now that they're not? You guys have set up, JC, how many sites have you set up for permits?
So we have 3. Yeah, we have 3 mobile pop-up center sites. One at Marjorie Park Marina, 97 Columbia Drive, DeSoto Park, 2615 East Korean Street, and then the Gandy Civic Center, 4207 West Oklahoma. So we have staff on call right now from 7 to 7. The Gandy site will be a bit different on the weekends, but our other 2 comfort stations will be 7 to 7, at least for the next 2 weeks, to help be there and accommodate people and walk them through this process.
Now, will there still be Chick-fil-A today?
Well, not sure who donates what day, so I can't speak on what the menu is from catering, but
just said I almost made it over yesterday just for that alone. But the fact that you've made it easier is great. But because you're now interacting without the barrier of distance, you know, people get intimidated. Oh my God, I got to go down to the building department and they're terrible. And oh my gosh, right. What questions are you getting that people aren't really thinking about that you have to, you know, get to them, whether it's breaking their heart or not? What are the things that you're like, oh, people really need to know this, or they need to ask themselves this question?
Well, before I answer that, also letting you know that the fees for residential trade permits and alterations are also waived. The mayor had, the city decided to waive those fees. So that's another barrier. Like you said, not only coming down to the building department, but now I got to come down to the building department and pay for something to fix my house. Like, at least we're just there to provide this information, to provide that insight. A lot of it is as you mentioned, it's going to be a long process. So a lot of people are generally just coming in to see what they can and can't do. So we've listed some items that don't need a permit. And so then people kind of know, okay, well, all right, I'm good. So I don't need a permit yet. So I can prep my house. I can get some of this stuff done. So then when the insurance claim comes through, or I'm able to then get a contractor, you're not paying additional money to do additional work that you could do yourself. So that's kind of what we're getting more of that. Just people are trying to feel us out is the best way to put it. They want to see what that FEMA substantial improvement, what it means. Obviously, all the areas that got hit the worst are in special flood hazard areas. Like, there's no doubt about it. And so, unfortunately, them learning these rules, because if they've been there since what, Dave, the 50s, the 40s, I mean, if that house has been there, they are oblivious to this. They do not know that there are additional rules that need to be followed. So pretty much for us, it's been more of the informational, just telling them this is what's there. And so being able to have that so they can have paper handouts of the FEMA substantial improvement form we just showed you, and other documents if the owners choose to want to do it themselves or they want to hire a contractor, you know, just walking them through those steps and the pros and cons of each of those things.
That's great. I'm really excited. When I saw that you were doing that in the key areas, I thought this is Tampa at its finest. So that's fantastic. Maybe you could settle the rumor for me. In what ways is FEMA coming into our area? I have family up in the Carolinas, and of course, you know, all hands on deck. In St. Pete, we saw a video today about a guy who had a dumpster company, and he's trying to put stuff in the landfills. And apparently they said you can't dump anymore right now. FEMA is going to pick them up. And then there was some back and forth about whether or not the police guy told him to dump I don't know. There was some rigmarole. Does Tampa, or Hillsborough County, if you know, have any sort of instruction from FEMA about what to do with debris? We've seen you guys out picking stuff up. Like Davis Island is riddled with your trucks picking things up. But have you heard of any of that? Is any, you know?
So I can't really speak to that specifically because we're more on the permitting side and the flooding and kind of on that recovery, like the post-storm kind of stuff. So I'm not quite sure on that, but we can try to get some information back to you once we find out.
Or which department handles that? That's not.
It'd be
Parks and
under
Rec.
solid waste at this point, because that's who's coming to pick up all of that information. So Larry Washington and his team, they're with solid waste. So they would probably know a little bit more about FEMA separations and things like that. I can't really speak to that.
Okay, perfect. And is now a good time to put in a pool?
No. No. We tried it, well, you'd be surprised. We've been receiving calls, and we told, we're trying to kind of lean, 60-40, focusing on storm relief efforts, and 40% still trying to do our normal business. So it's just trying to find that balance, because, we're still a bustling city, and there was other areas that did not get affected. And so they came to work, we're at Hannah, our property, nothing. We came back to work, business as usual. And so there are some developers on some projects that they want to make sure that are still moving. So we're trying to find that delicate balance right now, with homeowners potentially being displaced, and still trying to do our normal business in the city.
Yeah, it is truly a tale of two towns, that's for sure. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is, from a guy who's dove deep into this is really information that is important to folks, and having it come directly from you is so valuable. So if you were in the city of Tampa specifically, not just Hillsborough County, not in the area, in Tampa, this is relevant to you. If you're in Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, or any other municipality, make sure you check, because those little numbers change based on each municipality's FEMA setup, basically, for the credits. And you guys don't take the information from this and try and apply it over there. Just take the basics and then run with it. So again, thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you guys in person one day, hopefully under better conditions.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.